Hi everyone and welcome to my channel. I'm so sorry that I've been so quiet on here recently. There's just been so much going on since Christmas, and I was also not in the right frame of mind to be vlogging at the moment. But I'm back and I will be back to vlogging as many videos as much as I can. But also, as you can see from the title of this video, you can understand why I have been quiet. So yes, so I recently had a miscarriage just over about a month ago. So it has been a bit of a emotional whirlwind for me and for my partner. So I thought I'd do this video to share my story with you, to also help other women out there that have experienced a miscarriage or experienced some sort of pregnancy or baby loss. You know, I found it a comfort and a great support by talking about my experience and also listening to those who have experienced the same thing as me. I've also found really helpful that my friend recommended for me, which was to get a journal, a miscarriage journal, which I found on Etsy, so I just thought I'd show you. And it's really, really lovely. So, and it's really helped me write down my thoughts and my feelings. There's even like a page that I like that says a letter from me to you. So you write a letter to your baby, which I've clearly done. And there's like lovely little poems in there as well. And there was also 2 books that I read as well about baby loss by a woman called Zoe. Her books are called Saying Goodbye and The Guide to a Baby Loss. So I'll probably put down at the bottom of what her name is because I've forgotten her surnames. But no, they were really, really helpful. I found them very helpful indeed. So excuse the fact that I've got no makeup on. My hair is a right mess. I am at the process of growing it, so I've had short hair for such a long time. So I thought I'd tell you my story. So just before Christmas, I was 4 days late from my period, and I knew by day 4 that I was pregnant. I just knew. My body just knew, and I know my body. My husband was like, no, but I just knew. So on the 30th of November, I took a pregnancy test and it turned out I was pregnant, so I was right. So yeah, it was a bit of a shock because, you know, me and my husband have been talking about having another baby, even though we've got the 3 boys, but we would have loved one more. So especially as a married couple, so and it being our second baby together. So yeah, so it was a big shock, and it took a while to get our heads around it because we were thinking, oh my goodness, 4 children, how are we going to survive, how are we going to cope? But once we got our heads around it, we were quite excited. So I had the typical pregnancy symptoms that you get at the start of the pregnancy, which was fatigue and feeling very hormonal and very, very sick. My morning sickness, I don't know why they call it morning sickness, didn't kick in till like late afternoon, so like 3-4 in the afternoon when it was like time to cook dinner. I really hated cooking, and even the smell of food made me feel so sick. So yeah, and it would carry on right until the evening, and I'd probably be in bed by like 8 o'clock, 7:30. So I'll be in bed when the kids go to bed. So yeah, and then when I got to, I think I was 7 weeks pregnant, I unfortunately caught the flu. So I was ill in bed with a raging fever, all the flu symptoms that you get. I ended up calling my doctor and then saying to her, look, I'm 7 weeks pregnant. I'm really worried about the baby as I know that flu can be dangerous. So she gave me some antibiotics as well to try and help with the flu symptoms, and also I had a chest infection. So I ended up being in bed for 4 days. So Christmas was not what it was cracked up to be this year. So after Christmas, when I was 10 weeks pregnant, I noticed that my sickness had kind of stopped. It kind of like died down. I wasn't taking the anti-sicknesses as much, and I noticed that some of my cravings weren't as they should be. I noticed that my breasts were not as sore as what they were, and I just assumed it was just because it was a different pregnancy. So I rang my mum for a bit of advice, and I was like, Mum, my morning sickness has really calmed down, like, because when I was pregnant with my 2 boys, Ben and Jacob, I was really sick up until I was 16 weeks pregnant. I think I was 14 with Ben and 16 with Jacob, if I remember rightly. And, you know, and I was having all the cravings and all the other pregnancy symptoms that you get. But with this baby, they kind of died down. So my mum was very much like, oh, it just could be, it's a different pregnancy and your body's just doing it differently. So I thought nothing of it. I thought, okay, maybe I'll call my doctor or my midwife on the Monday. So, because it was a bit too late now. So that weekend, it was just myself, Mark and Jacob. Riley and Ben were with their other parents. So Riley was back at home with his mum and Ben was with his dad. So me and Mark went out for lunch that Saturday afternoon, and my mother-in-law had Jacob for the afternoon, which was really, really nice, because it was nice for me and Mark to talk and just rekindle and have a bit of me and him time, because Christmas was just so manic. So then we were talking about the baby, we were talking about how excited it was going to be and how the boys would feel, and you know, and all our little plans and stuff that we had in our head, and whether it was a girl or a boy. We were kind of hoping a girl, because obviously we got 3 boys, but we'd have been happy either way. So before we left to go home, I popped to the bathroom, and whilst I went to the bathroom, I noticed as I pulled down my underwear that there was a bit of blood on my panty liner. Now, I've never had any bleeding throughout my pregnancy, and I have had 2 previous miscarriages before. So in my head, I was thinking, oh, please God, no, don't let this be another miscarriage. So, and those miscarriages were like really, really early on. I was like 4 or 5 weeks. So I went back to the table, didn't really say anything to Mark, but I was inside panicking. It wasn't until we got to my mother-in-law's the bleeding started to get just that little bit more heavier, like it was a bit more dark red. And I was getting lower abdominal pain. So I then got Mark's attention and said, I'm having some bleeding. Mark was a bit worried and told me to call 111, which is calling the NHS 111 line instead of going straight down to A&E. So I rang them, told them what was going on. They then told me that I'd get a call back from a doctor. I got a call back from a doctor about an hour after I'd spoken to them, and they advised me to go down A&E and to have a blood test done. But I chose not to go down to A&E because A&E in this country is manic and it's very busy, and you can be waiting up to 12 hours. So I decided just to go home, have a warm bath and get an early night, and to keep my feet up. Come the next day, the bleeding got worse and the pain got worse. I ended up back down the hospital. I spoke to a nice doctor. She advised me that I was to go and have an early pregnancy scan, as I was now nearly 11 weeks pregnant. So yeah, I went back home and I was expecting a phone call back from the hospital. I didn't hear anything, so I ended up calling my own GP and speaking to them. Come the next day, Wednesday morning, I got a phone call from the hospital, from the early pregnancy team unit, to say could I come down for an early scan for 11:30, and this was the 18th of January. So I was running around trying to find someone to look after Jacob and to take me to the hospital. Luckily enough, my mum was there and she took me down to the hospital, and my auntie and my nan looked after Jacob. The hardest thing I found was having to be in a waiting room full of women that were about to go and have their first scan or their second scan. And there was me sitting there thinking, I don't even know what's going on. I don't even know if my baby's alive. I don't even know if it's there. You know, all these thoughts were going through my head. So I then got called in by a nurse. And I went into the room. I told her what was happening. I told her when I started bleeding and that I have had miscarriages before and that I've had 2 healthy pregnancies. So she told me to prop myself on the bed and lay down and pull my top up. So I did that. She then got the cold gel and rubbed it onto my stomach. So there was that horrible, awkward silence. And my heart was just beating out of my chest. I could really feel it. It was going really, really fast. And I'll never forget those words that that midwife said to me when I was laying there on the bed. She said, "I'm so sorry, Kirsty, but your baby has died." Those words will haunt me for the rest of my life. I just remember putting my hands to my face and crying my eyes out. She then showed me the scan and I could see this tiny, tiny little baby. It looked like a little bean. And it was all like snook and cuddled up in my womb, in my uterus, so asleep. I then said to her, "It's really tiny, how many weeks am I?" She then said the baby passed at 8 weeks. So what I had was known to be called a missed miscarriage. So basically what it means is that the baby had passed away in my womb, but I hadn't passed it and I was still experiencing some pregnancy symptoms. And then obviously the pregnancy symptoms stopped. So I then cleaned myself up, tidied myself up, and then sat back down next to my mum. They then gave me 2 options. The option was to take a tablet, go home and pass the baby naturally. Or the other option was to have an operation, like a procedure, to have the baby removed. She said, "You don't have to make the decision now, you can go home, speak to your husband, and then we'll see you next week, just to check that you're okay and to have another scan." So she also gave me another piece of form, which was to see what I wanted to do with the baby once I had passed it or once I'd given birth to it. So there was 2 options. There was an option of that I would do my own memorial, so my own like funeral service, or I would let the hospital deal with the baby. And already in my head, I'd already decided that no, I wanted to do it my own way, and I wanted to have a ceremony for my unborn child, because I felt that it would help me with my grieving process and it would be closure. Sorry. So I remember leaving the hospital in tears and seeing all these women waiting to have their scans, because I couldn't help it. I left that room crying and I could just see all these women looking at me. And I just felt so angry with myself and my body for what I had done. My body was meant to protect this tiny little thing like it had protected Ben and Jacob, and I couldn't understand why it didn't protect my baby. So obviously I rang Mark and told Mark, and he was pretty upset, but obviously he was grieving in a different way as to me, because I was already bonding with that baby. I was already connecting with that baby because the baby was growing inside me. I just remember feeling so tearful for the first few weeks. So the following week I went back with my mum to have another scan, and the baby was still inside me. And I'd already spoke to Mark, and I'd already made the decision that I would have the procedure to have the baby removed. So on the 31st of January 2023, I went back to the hospital, had to be there for like 7 a.m. and I was getting prepped and ready to give birth to my unborn child. So basically, I was given some tablets to help dilate my cervix. Sorry. Now that was awful. I was in so much pain. It was like my body was going through labour, but I knew at the end of it I was going to get nothing. I just remember the pain being very excruciating, and I felt really, really sick. And I called for the midwives or the doctors to come, and they said there's nothing they could do. This is just your cervix dilating, ready for the baby to come. I was then taken down to theatre at 2:30, 2:45 that afternoon. It was a really weird experience because I was put to sleep. So I would have no idea or no recollection of what was going on. And I remember feeling very tearful and overwhelmed and scared of what was about to happen. So basically, I was about to give birth, but I was asleep. So we obviously didn't know the sex of the baby, but we assumed it was a girl. So and before I had the operation, we'd already spoken to a funeral director, and we named her Isla Mae. So Isla Mae was born on the 31st of January 2023. And I remember waking up in the recovery room thinking, where am I? And I was in pain, and I was tired, and I was bleeding, and all I wanted to do was to see my mum and to get home to Mark and the boys. Because my mum came with me and Mark stayed at home with the children because Ben was at school and someone had to look after Jacob. About a few weeks later, after I had my op, obviously I was home, I was recovering. We went to the funeral directors to discuss the funeral for Isla. So her funeral is being held on the 10th of March, which is a week this Friday. And I don't know how I feel right now. It's not really sunk in yet that I'm about to have a funeral for my child, which I never thought I'd ever experience. I've read stories, and obviously I know people that have lost children, and my heart goes out to them. But I know for certain that I remember feeling that when I lost Isla, and even after I had my op, I just remember feeling like, should I be grieving? Should I be grieving for this baby that I don't even know, that I've never met? I've never held her in my arms. I don't even know what she looks. I don't know what she smells like, or, you know. And there are women out there that have lost babies later on in pregnancy, or even, you know, and I just didn't know how to feel. And all I know is that I felt alone. But having the support from friends and family, and reading and having support from websites like we have Tommy, who is a baby loss website, and they've been really, really helpful and supportive throughout this whole thing. I didn't feel so alone, because I felt like I'm not the only woman in the world that's going through this. I'm not the only woman in the world that's grieving for my baby. So I really hope this video helps you throughout your miscarriage experience, and I really hope it also lets you know that you are not alone, and that there is loads of support out there. And please make sure you get it, and also please make sure you speak out, because there's nothing worse than hiding all that emotion, and you know, grief is such a weird experience. You can have moments where you're crying, you can have moments where you can be happy, but then you feel guilty to be happy. You can have moments where you're angry. So please make sure you get the support you need. I'm really sorry this video has been quite an emotional video, but I just wanted to tell my story. So yeah, so I hope to see you all soon.